So, my name is Cameron Shropshire. I'm the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Chair, and I'm with Douglas County Search and Rescue. And I wanted to also introduce our panel members.
I am Cassia Gede. I'm with Albuquerque Mountain Rescue, and I've been with AMRC for 8 years, and I've had a lot of different experiences and roles on the team, from administrative with public relations, fundraising, a board member, as a member at large, and I'm one of the few women in the history of our organization that's a certified triple tech in rock, winter, and search.
I'm Amy Elbrin. I'm the Director of Operations with Western Mountain Rescue in Gunnison, Colorado. And I've been with our team for 9 years. And relevant to this discussion, over the past about 2 years, I've kind of led our team through the handling of some complaints regarding diversity and inclusion on the team.
My name is Marco Machin. I've been with Search and Rescue for about 15 years with San Bernardino County. Prior to that, I did search and rescue for adventure races all over the place. I am on the West Valley Search and Rescue team and also the county dog team, and have done dual teams for a while. I don't know, we don't call it triple tech, but I'm a full MRA member, which means I can deploy in any condition anywhere. And our county is very large, and we have alpine all the way to 130-degree Joshua Tree National Park heat. I've been the only woman on our team for about 12 years. We just had another woman join maybe about 3 years ago. So my experience is a little bit different because nobody really messes with me. But,
Hi, I'm Vladka. I'm from Seattle Mountain Rescue. I used to be the recruitment chair, and I'm currently helping or being on the leadership MRA board as well the EI board, and I'm the representative for Washington State as a Seattle delegate. We have a fair amount of ladies on our unit, and it's been actually good the past 5 years. That's how long I have been in the unit. So, thank you.
I'm Shawnee McCullough. I'm with Riverside Mountain Rescue Unit in Riverside, Southern California. I've been on the team for about 4 years. We have MRA status on our team too, which basically means we're type 1 searchers. So I reached that level a couple years ago. And I've served on the board in the past, and I serve on our training committee. Our team is very fortunate that we've had several women on the team before I joined and since. And so I think our team is doing fairly well in that. And so there's always room for improvement, but I'm happy to be here and share with all of you.
So I'm going to give a few quick slides just around what the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee is doing for MRA. Then we're going to jump in to our panel discussion, followed up by a discussion and some information around the Women in Rescue program, just so you all can get information on that, because there's some initiatives that the committee is doing to support the organization as well. So why do we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we know if we implement that into our organization, similar to our jobs, it's going to increase our chances of getting access to a larger talent pool. So we'll have better resources for our services we're providing, an increased sense of belonging for team members, higher levels of trust, increased engagement, and ideally decrease numbers and turnover and team members leaving the teams. So we want to focus on really, what are these important things and why we want to focus, through MRA, but also provide some information to the other teams as well. So one of the things our committee is really looking at is diversity beyond demographics. So we really want to focus on all these other components of diversity that are going to help teams grow and be successful beyond being strong technical teams, but are we good teams in general to support each other. So again, DEI is, it's about, commitment, not compliance. We don't want to just worry about having certain numbers. We really want to figure out what that commitment is and how to keep people engaged and focused and feel like they're supported. And again, it's not about counting heads, but making those heads count. So we want to make sure we have, as many of the right people that are going to make us, be efficient and successful. So the current plan for diversity and equity inclusion, we are currently in the process of putting together a SWOT analysis. So we're working with a gentleman who's really helping us put together this analysis. We're going to be able to provide questions and surveys out to the different teams again as we're looking at what are those challenging issues that everyone is dealing with surrounding DE&I, and then how can MRA provide tools and resources to support those. We're also looking at conducting some Thursday meetings, some affinity groups as well. So we really want to, again, provide as many services and supports to all the MRA teams. And one of the important things I wanted to note is that all of our initiatives are being addressed and developed proactively, not punitively. So it's important that we want to do things to, support teams. This isn't everyone's doing something wrong. We want to do things to support everyone's growth and development. As teams grow and change, members change, the demographic makeup changes. So we want to make sure we have resources again to support those. And I put up here, this is the vision, diversity and inclusion through MRA. It kind of points us in the direction of kind of what we're really focusing on in all of our initiatives and efforts. And then finally, just a plug, we are looking to add more members to our diversity and equity inclusion committee. So if you're interested, definitely speak with me afterwards. Here's my email address. But we're also looking at some of the initiatives we're working on that we're going to need champions at each, throughout each MRA team. So again, if you're interested in more information about the committee or you're interested in being a champion and want more information on that, please feel free to reach out. So now we will jump into our panel questions. So the first question is, how is your team holding each other accountable? How are team members holding each other accountable when it comes to issues of diversity and equity and inclusion, and kind of what are the pros and the cons you've seen come from that?
So again, my team back in 2020, I think February of 2020, received some past team members put together a list of basically anonymous complaints that they had collected in regards to, it was heavily focused on women feeling excluded from the team, but also minorities, other folks that just had felt unheard or left the team for different reasons. This group of women had put together a set of anonymous complaints. And so we have been working for the last 2 years very actively on kind of seeing where this went wrong, seeing how we can prevent this for any future members, and hoping to make a more inclusive space on Western. And I think the biggest element of that, at least to tackle in the beginning, was our reporting structure. It was very clear to us right off the bat that how they had to go about this, which looked like them collecting these anonymous complaints and then submitting them actually. So Western, for some background, is based around Western State College and Western Colorado University in Gunnison, Colorado. We are the only collegiate-based team within the MRA. So our affiliation with the college does make us a little unique. Our average age is 19, and our average tenure for members tends to be about 4 years. So we have to face things very uniquely that probably won't be relevant to some of your teams. But one of the big things that was immediately obvious was just having a lack of a reporting structure, and then also a lack of that sort of open door policy and people feeling like they can speak up about these issues. And what that led to was, instead of us being able to address these issues while they were small, and many of them were something that could have been handled very productively in the moment, or even just, when the situation was arising, it accumulated into this really big issue and this really nasty looking list of complaints that, being anonymous and being members, had already turned over, sometimes we weren't able to directly respond to. So that was our first task, and that reporting structure and how the team is accountable to our members and upholding the resolution of these complaints was the first thing we tackled, and it was kind of twofold. We initially looked at the team and how we can have multiple different facets for people to anonymously or not anonymously report complaints that would allow them to go through many channels in case it was somebody on the board that was the complaint was regarding or whatever their situation might have been. And then also very clear expectations of how those complaints would be handled, so that they knew going into this, like, what it would look like, what the next steps would be, what would be expected of them, what they could expect of the board. So that was one element of it. And this reporting structure it wasn't just relevant to complaints of culture or complaints of diversity and inclusion. It was something that they could utilize for any variety of things to kind of make it less of this, like, oh gosh, if I submit this anonymous form, like, I'm going to be blowing up something on the team, like, to make it just a little more welcoming and a little something that would be utilized and that people knew where it was. So that was one element of it, but then we also kind of looked at our members and how, what their responsibilities in this were. So we put this reporting structure in place, and then at the same time, we also established both a code of conduct and kind of code of ethics for our members that, we all had, and was a well-known thing, and we had these rules and guidelines that we all followed, but it wasn't necessarily written down, and it wasn't an official document. And then also a statement of personal responsibility for our members that just looked at, like, how, we expect them to interact as teammates, and then also how, what we needed from them if there was something arising, whether it was to follow the reporting structure or to report it if they're seeing something unjust happening to their teammates. So it was kind of twofold to say, here is how our board is accountable to you guys, and we'll handle these complaints, and then also here is what we expect of you guys. And I think that was, every team faces it, but in our culture of 18 and 19-year-olds, like, that was a big one for us, was people don't know how to handle themselves in these group or professional settings yet. So that was a major element for us.
So our team is with the Sheriff's Department, and we have a command structure that we are supposed to report through. It starts with either your squad leader, or you can go to the member at large, and they will present whatever issue you have to the board, and then the board will decide how they're going to handle it. At that point, if it escalates to something serious enough that the board presents it to the department, our deputy coordinator then takes over at that point. If it's a very serious issue, then it bounces into the sheriff's system of reporting and goes into their system, which goes through their chain of command, which would be our deputy coordinator, and then the immediate sergeant. We have 18 different units in our county, so they're all at different stations. So it'd be the station sergeant. And if at that point it's not resolved, then it bounces to our Office of Emergency Operations Division and goes into their hierarchy of sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and it can go up from there to the assistant sheriff. I have had an issue that did escalate up, but it wasn't as a result of any of the particular issues we're talking about right now. The pros of the system are you know exactly who is going to be looking at your complaint next. The cons of the system are that there's not a lot of feedback during this process. And so once you make this complaint, if you decide to be anonymous, it usually doesn't leave the team. If you decide not to, then it has to be addressed. And at that point, it kind of goes into this washing machine of whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And you are kind of put on the outside until it is either resolved or someone comes back and says, you know, we found this isn't valid. And I think a reporting process also needs to report back to the individual filing the complaint. And someone either needs to be assigned or someone needs to give that information at where they are in those stages as it progresses and what the results of each stage are. I don't think it's fair to just have someone make a complaint and 6 months later find out that that complaint is being dismissed. The other con is, all of us up here are representing teams, and we have to be very careful because we don't want to demean our teams, especially since this will be out in a public venue. Our department is very good and supportive of our search and rescue processes and teams. They're amazing. But this is more of a universal assessment. One of the problems in general I see when complaints go to the board is the same people have been on the board for decades. And some of that culture that has arisen during that time has arisen why the same people have been on that board for decades. We do have turnover on our board, but some of the higher positions don't turn over. And I think sometimes when you have term limits on board members, it allows for new blood, new ideas, and also progression, not only in cultural and ethical issues, but also in technical issues. And I think that's something that we all need to look at, especially as we go into the future. Things have changed a lot, and we're going to have a lot of natural attrition throughout all of search and rescue in the next 5 years because a lot of our older members are at an age where they're either going to retire or, other things are going to happen. But it's kind of hard if you bring a complaint when the fox is watching the hen house as to where it's going to go. So I don't like that about it. And I don't like once it goes into the sheriff department, it becomes an issue of where is the liability for the department on how we handle this complaint, because everybody starts to circle the wagons. And I think a lot of these issues could be resolved in a smaller scope without having that formal inquiry, but there is no process once it shoots into the sheriff's department for that informal inquiry where potentially this could be a liability issue. So the solution to that, I am not sure of. I'm hoping this committee and some of this interaction we're having will help me to bring back ideas for the team and maybe even our department to start looking into on how to handle volunteers with complaints, and not just for minorities and women, but also for all members. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. To understand to what we do here right now, I think it's very important. This is not something we are all experts in DEI. This is not like we are studying this, exactly what it's supposed to happen. We know exactly how to go moving forward. We're a panel of people who have some experiences, who can share stories and cues, and maybe you can take it back to your unit, and maybe you can take one. If you take 1% from this, great, it's a successful panel. So this is not pointing fingers, blaming anyone, or telling anyone what to do. Going back to the question that Cameron asked about how we keep our team members accountable for microaggressions, or how we address these microaggressions, pros and cons to it. I have to say, I joined unit 5 years ago at this point, and there were probably 2 incidents, actually 3 incidents what happened. The first one was first day or first week as I joined. There was a gentleman who comes up to me and he says, "Which one is your boyfriend?" And I'm used to it, right? I'm tiny little girl and I'm in mountain rescue, right? So I have been climbing for 20 years and I said, "No one." And I didn't go anyone, I didn't complain about anything. I didn't say like, "Oh my gosh, he was such an asshole, he put me down." I'm like, "Sorry dude, no, I'm here for myself." Right? I did share it with him a couple years later, and he did share, and he really apologized to me. So I didn't have an issue with that. The second issue was more with female to female, where I had to set clear boundaries. And I had to say, "Listen, this is not what I'm going to do, and this is what I don't need you to do. I really need you to support others, women as well, and be kind to each other." I did share that with some people on the board, I did share that with some folks, and I think they were very supportive. So if there was any further, deeper, meaner issue, I'm sure there would be a structure that would be addressing it. If there's a third incident where someone was power hungry, that had to be addressed right away, where none of the units were actually essentially then injured or essentially leading to a bigger problems. So I think, again, this is kind of like giving you perspectives rather than like this is right or this is wrong.
So on my unit, we have we're through the sheriff's department, so we have the same type of official complaint structure as San Bernardino. When new members join our team, there's a kind of an orientation checklist that we go through, and one of the things on there is making it fairly clear and open that if you have any issue with any other team member for any reason, that you can talk to any board member, or you can talk to any type 1 searcher level, MRA level member, to just bring up your concern. So you can come to any person on the team that you feel comfortable with who has that kind of level of status. And it's about roughly half of our team is kind of at that level. So there are a lot of different people that you could reach out to who could take an issue up to the board if you didn't want to talk to a board member directly. And then if you aren't comfortable doing that, or if that doesn't go and get resolved, then you can go to our sheriff's liaison. And our team we have very few set rules. We joke that we're kind of the cowboy team of the MRA. And so most of what we do tends to be addressed by culture on the team, to where any types of things that I've seen where someone was maybe treated poorly based on any reason, or perceived to be treated poorly, it kind of comes across as if you see something, say something, which works really well for us. Where there was one time where we were working with some people who are outside of our team, and this other agency member came up and they said hi to the 2 men who are next to me, and they never addressed me directly. And so within like 5 minutes, one of the 2 men that they talked to came over to me and said, "Hey, did they ignore you? Because that's not right, and I'll go talk to them right now." And it turned out that I had actually waved to that person just previously, and they'd waved back, so it was fine. But just having that kind of immediate support and friendship from pretty much everyone on my team currently is something that I'm very grateful for. And so kind of a pro of that is that it works out really well, but a con of it is that you have to make sure that that culture remains, and that it's imparted to anyone new on the team. So kind of another example is when I was on the board of the team, so our board, I guess to step back, our board of directors changes over every year for every single position. So we do have a lot of people who are on the board every year, but there's always that option of having new board members, which is a really good thing that I think that we have with our team. So it doesn't really feel like it can never get on the board. So people's voices can be heard that way. But we had some newer members on the team. We had a training member who happened to know personally someone who had just joined our team, and she was at a board meeting and she mentioned, "Hey, I don't know about this person. Like I've met him several times previously, and he makes me kind of uncomfortable." So what happened was one of the board members happened to be mentor to that person, and so he just made sure to kind of keep an eye on him in general, kind of gauge his personality. And if he wasn't out on a mission with someone, then he talked to someone who he trusted very well to just keep an eye on the person, to just see how his temperament was. And that particular concern that the woman had wasn't relayed. It was just, "Hey, this person is new. We don't know them very well. Just kind of let me know how they feel as a person." And that's not very far out of the way of what we normally do, to where anyone who has someone that they're mentoring, usually they'll keep an eye on them, make sure they don't have any time where they're in over their head with something, kind of help to guide people. And so it's normal for us to check up on each other. So we had the person who was mentoring that individual, kind of keeping track. And then also, as I was the one woman on the board, I was asked to go and just check in with her again a little bit later to see how she was doing with the whole situation. And it turned out that she was more comfortable with him. I guess he'd gotten married, and so they interacted better now, for whatever that personal reasons were. And then he ended up leaving the team for his own reasons, which were completely separate, a few months later. So it was never really any large issue, but it was never like it never went into the board minutes. Although we have like a note just for the board members to remember that it was something, but it never went out to the full team as, hey, there was this concern with this person brand new, because that puts a stigma on someone. But it was kept track of. And I think that's, for a team that has a really good culture and cohesiveness, like you can have really, really strict rules, and that works great for some teams. And you can have some teams that are massively quirky, and not having strict rules can also work. So I guess kind of my comment on that is, whatever works for your team, just find a way that works really well for your team, and go with that.
And I'll say, I think it's really inspiring to hear about teams like Shawnee's, where they're able to address these issues through cultural practices. And it is important for us to look at this at the lens of what works for our team. And I often wonder, is that something that my team could aspire to? Because we've been having a lot of conversations around diversity and equity. And there's a lot of differing perspectives and opinions. And I'll go ahead and start with a story that I personally experienced. I was on the team for a year, so still pretty novice. And we had an ongoing search for a missing climber, and I was in my second operational period. So there's the first question. Why was I out there during the second operational period? 10 plus hours in the field. I know better now. I should not have been there. I was tired. And I was on a small team. We were trying to cover a lot of ground, and I was with a male counterpart. And I needed to join 2 ropes together, and I was going to do it with a simple double fisherman's. And that knot is one that gave me so many problems my first year, because I could never nest them correctly my first time. So I tied the knot, I looked at it, I said, dang it, I didn't get it right. I untied it, I retied it, I nested it correctly. And the male team member who was in the field with me looks at me and says, well, if you were a man, I would yell at you, but since you're a woman, it's cute. So I'm an educator by profession, and I would never consider giving a student criticism like that. First of all, yelling at an individual is an example of a systemic, toxic culture, right? We don't learn from being yelled at. It creates this culture where we're afraid to step into the space to say that I don't know something. And when somebody's life is on the line, we need to be able to say when we don't know something. But then to follow that up with the comment of, but since you're a woman, it's cute. This is going to be one of those undertones, one of those cultural indoctrinations that suggests that women have less capabilities in the situations than men. And I don't think that that's an easy situation to address with culture. I think that in the long term, we can get away from a culture shift like that. But this was 7 years ago for me. And there's still this underlying tone within our organization. And I will say, my team is my family. I would go to bat for pretty much everybody on that team, and I love and adore a lot of them. They've walked me through very hard portions of my life. I've walked many of them through hard portions of their life. We've suffered greatly together in the field. But that being said, some of these indoctrinations that we don't even know, these microaggressions that are really hard to recognize, and they sit within all of us. I know that I have pre-existing tendencies. I see it all the time as a teacher. It's something that I work on bringing into my classroom. What are things that I have been socialized to do, and how do I represent that and break through that mold as a teacher? So for this instance, it's really hard to think about culture shifting that. And this is one of a very long, unfortunate list that I have of situations where it may not have just been a team member, it might not have been intentionally mean or intended that way, or maybe it was something that happened with another agency outside of our own. But what I needed as a member is, as opposed to it being addressed with culture, I needed something more tangible. And at that time, I did bring that comment up, and it was dismissed by the member of leadership that I brought it up to. And I was new. I wanted to be on mountain rescue, and I didn't want to make waves, so I kept it to myself for a very long time. And so something that I think would work well for some teams, and I would like to see this be adopted for my team, is to have a policy for reporting that doesn't create alienation and retaliation for individuals. And so we've seen progress within our organization. Within my time on the team, I've seen a discrimination policy written. I've seen a sexual harassment policy written, and that's good. It's a good foundation so that we're at least able to say that these shouldn't be accepted within our culture. But sometimes when those get past the point of, well, it shouldn't be accepted, but we do still accept it, for me, I feel like there should be a place to report it to. And sometimes those members that you would report it to that are on your board of directors or in your technical leaderships, they're the ones that perpetuating this culture. And so I think it would be really helpful to be able to have some affiliate support through the MRA with processes and regulations of if it needs to escalate to that point, where can we go that doesn't have legal ramifications, that doesn't tarnish the team, because we love our teams. I mean, altruism brought me to rescue, but community has kept me in rescue. And I don't want to hurt my community, but I do want to grow as a community and be able to become better together.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, so everyone definitely has different team makeups, different perspectives, and it's really finding I like, finding what works for your team that's going to help be successful, and really finding this question.
So the MRA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee that recently put on the MRA website a template document that MRA teams can adopt if they so choose, and as a resource. The reporting structure, anonymous reporting, and specific actions that the reporter and the person being reported should follow, and specific instructions for how that should be handled at the board level. So it's more of a resource, and as you know, MRA is limited in what we can do, but we can provide resources, just like we do for rigging. Can't tell anyone rigging what to do, but we'll provide resourcing available. So I encourage teams to take a look at that. It's on the MRA website. If you have any questions and can't find it, you can email Cameron.
So we know that we all individually have our own personal biases. So I think it's important to acknowledge those and really understand how that affects us, affects our work, affects our volunteer work with search and rescue. So I want to put it to the panel. With the understanding that we all have biases, how have those affected you negatively in your work, in your volunteer work, in your life?
So like I mentioned, I've done a lot of work personally around biases, and I think it's really nice to try and focus conversations like this as a call-in versus a call-out. So this is a very hard personal share for me because I'd like to think that I am above carrying biases. But something that came up for me last year in my classroom was I had a black student who came up to me and we were talking about spring break plans. And he told me he was going to Florida for spring break. And I asked him about his plans over the break, and he was like, well, my family has a vacation home. And it's not that I did or said anything, but the reaction that I had was I was surprised that his family had a vacation home. And that is this cultural bias, especially for the demographic of students that I serve, is most often our students that are black come from lower socioeconomic classes. And so it was a moment for me to sit and be like, wow, here is my bias very clearly. Here is a preconceived notion that I'm carrying, and it forces me to raise the question of how does that bias subconsciously play into other pieces of my instruction as an educator, but also maybe as a first responder. What are some of the biases I might bring into the field as a rescuer, as somebody who's providing patient care, and how can I personally examine that to become better, a better educator, a better rescuer, or a better human. And so I think it can really help for us to hear someone else share how we are imperfect as individuals and there's room for every one of us to grow. Something that I've often seen in rescue is I do feel like there's a lot of biases because I am a woman. There's an assumption that I am either slower or I can't go over the edge because I'm too small to handle a patient. Well, I have a large patient over the edge. I'm going to take more pulleys with me. I'm going to address it with mechanical advantage, and I'm going to address it with the knowledge that I have. So the fact that somebody might assume that I'm unable to perform a task because of my size, and that's often denoted because of my gender, feels really unfair. And this is something that I feel like we can work on addressing as well within organizations. If my organization through technical training had the conversation of, well, because you're small, let's talk more about this. Let's talk more about how to use mechanical advantage. Not assume that you might be incapable of doing it, but to find tools that support individuals to be able to be successful no matter their size or their gender or their skills or their capabilities. Because having diversity within organizations allows us to be better because we have different ways of approaching problems, of solving those problems, and kind of different thoughts, things that we can bring in to either build our culture, to evaluate our systems. Maybe we do want to walk straight uphill because we've got the strong, long-legged individuals, and maybe we don't. That's a conversation that we can have in the field with our members. But taking the moment to pause and reflect on how do we have those conversations, how do we bring those biases in, how do we get through the assumptions that we like to subconsciously carry are huge, and that's a lot of individual work. But it's hard to be motivated to do it as an individual, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't have done most of the work that I've done on this if I weren't an educator. My profession holds me accountable to consistently examine what I'm doing, and if maybe we can continue as teams to support the development of what we would consider these soft skills. Maybe they're not the direct life-saving skills, but they are indirect life-saving skills because it allows our teams to work more efficiently together with the skill sets that everybody's bringing in.
So I guess my background, I was raised on a cattle ranch in Oklahoma, and my mom is John Dutton, if you've seen Yellowstone. We joke about it as a family, but it's actually really, I think we're silently terrified. And so I was raised with the hard work trumps everything. That is the value I was raised in, is hard work. And I think that's a pretty common thread in mountain rescue. And I go through life, go through my time on the team with just I had this bias, that I got to the position that I'm in because of hard work, that people got to the position they're in because of their own hard work, and if they're not in a position they'd like to be in, they need to work harder. And so for me, when I was first told of these complaints that the team was receiving, first off, I had a whole lot of shame to get through because here I was, the first female director of my team, facing a discrimination issue against women. And I had to, the first step for me was just getting around that. I could not see the true issues or see that there were gatekeepers in place for other women to achieve similar ranks or similar positions on the team, or just to be, to feel like they belong because of my own biases of, it's not because they're women, it's because they're not working as hard as I was. I had really, kind of without acknowledging this own bias of mine, carved my own space that I felt like I had, bushwhacked through and had the thick skin and put in the work to have earned this spot on the team, and then that was possible for other people. And I guess I share this because I don't think teams should have shame or try to bury these issues when they do come up. That was something that initially, that's exactly what I wanted to do, is I wanted to resolve this quickly and quietly and bury it and not acknowledge that this is a thing and this is something that I contributed to. And that was really the first step, and being able to get past that, acknowledge that this was something that I was working on, that everyone on my team was working on, that you guys are all working on, and be able to ask for help, look for outside resources. We used the document that the MRA put on to kind of develop our reporting software and be able to not have to reinvent the wheel because we're trying to quietly resolve this internally. So I think, yeah, this question, and we wanted to put it out there to say that none of us up here are perfect, and this, you know, having these issues brought up to you as a team is a moment of growth. It's not like, yes, you got to this point. Yes, there might be issues. Yes, we may have caused negative things to people that have quit the team or are uncomfortable in their spot on the team, but it's being brought to you. That took a lot of vulnerability from whoever it was, and this is an opportunity for you to grow and recognize those biases within the team. So I think being able to share that and hear that none of us are perfect. I know I feel like Western is getting to a really good place, but we're not perfect in that. And just being able to, I think one of the other overarching themes in how we address this was how can we sort of live with these unconscious biases that we hold, work on them as people, but recognize that they're not something that we're immune to, and how can we, you know, make any selection criteria for missions or steps along the way to achieve a certain rank or position. How can we make those qualifications very transparent and something that you know, we can maybe put on paper or have a number to, or have an attendance requirement or something for that allows us to work around these unconscious biases that we have and that we need to accept that we will have. And just be able to work with them instead of against them necessarily, and say that our job is to resolve our biases. Instead, be able to acknowledge that they're there and see them more willingly, and then work while we still hold them, was a big perspective we had when addressing this with my team.
A lot of what she just said I can kind of echo. We all met last night, and we came up with these questions because we were looking for common threads that went across different teams and different generations. I'm almost 60. We came up with these questions to pose to you, in particular this one, to challenge you to think about the biases you have with team members. In particular, a lot of us have biases with new team members, and analyze what those biases are, challenge yourself to acknowledge them, and decide whether or not you want to live with those or not. And that's not just, you know, a search and rescue skill, that's a life skill. And hopefully we're all trying to get better. My personal experience, and I'll keep it restricted to SAR, as a black female lesbian who has practiced large animal veterinary medicine for the last 34 years, you can imagine I have run into a lot of biases. And I have developed a lot of biases. Professionally, I oftentimes will decide whether or not I'll take a check from somebody when I drive into their yard and look at their domicile. And some that are nice I take checks from, and some that are no, I want cash. But restricting that to search and rescue, most of my biases come in twofold. I think we've all been in situations where we have team members that we don't really want to deploy with. And we've developed that bias sometimes on site. Maybe they physically don't look like they're capable, or maybe they talk too much when they're going up the trail, or maybe they don't think critically, and it kind of gets you to a point where you're just like not willing to accept what they have to say, because you know they always have something to say, and you know that it's always kind of like half thought through. And they become a bit of a pariah on the team, and that bias develops, and it usually escalates over time, and sometimes it develops into situations where you don't want to deploy with them, where you hold off responding to a page until you see other names pop up. I've done these things, and this is specific to search and rescue, because they are very unpleasant to deploy with for 22 hours. I have to challenge myself every single time and remind myself that that's not what I got into this for, and it is my responsibility to express to them why I feel the way I do, and in a respectful manner, and help them to understand that, then give them the responsibility if they choose to alter that behavior. And if they don't, where does it go from there? I don't know. The other bias I often have deals with, specific to this panel. We recently have had several women come on the team. They haven't lasted very long. Our requirements for a team are pretty extreme, and it's not gender specific. It's male or female don't usually make it through. We usually, there's a lot of requirements. However, when I see women coming onto the team, and not just our team, I'm talking all county units, the first thing I worry about is, are they going to be able to handle the workload and not take away from the energy of some of my stronger male members? That's a big bias I have. And I have been proven wrong over and over again in that bias, that the women can handle the workload just like I can. But I worry about that. I worry about a lot of times when I am in a situation, and this is getting very personal, where there are a primarily male-dominated environment and another woman comes into it, we oftentimes as women stand on that woman to lift ourselves up instead of lifting both of us up. Because, and it's primarily a male-dominated environment. If you have a bunch of women that are together, we don't often do that to each other. We don't put each other down. But if we are faced with an environment where it's mainly male, and we have 2 or 3 other women come in, or 1 other woman come in, we will oftentimes make her appear not as successful as us in order to progress. So I have to caution myself on that. I don't know why that occurs. I think when we talked about it, it was a commonality that we found, and so that's something I concern myself with too. I have oftentimes either ignored or joined in some of the teasing that probably would be inappropriate to fit in over the last decade. I don't think that's okay. There are people that come under a team that have a story that's not my story, and therefore what might be said is hurtful or impactful to them. It may not affect me, but I've ignored it and I've allowed it to happen, and therefore my teammates feel it's okay because they spent a decade with me over the last 10 or 13 years, and they know if I don't like something, I'll tell them. So there's a lot of things that I've had to think about as we've had more women come onto our team, and I want to encourage more women that have made me feel ashamed about allowing myself to be part of the problem and not looking for solutions. And I have really good male teammates. I mean, if I brought these things up to them, they would make strong efforts not to behave in a way that would be considered offensive or disrespectful in any way. So that is something that I am hoping to take forward as I continue my career in search and rescue, as I go back to the team, and not be part of that problem, but hopefully part of the solution in a positive manner for my team.
You okay? That's okay. Yeah, I think I will put a little bit different spin on this from different perspective, but then I will come to what actually Margot was talking about. So I didn't grow up in this country. I'm not from here. So my biases are very differently based than probably most of the United States. I grew up in communism and essentially post-communism. The biases come from social economical classes, right? It comes from, it doesn't matter what color you are, male or female. It does matter who you voted for and if your parents were in communistic party. Which reflected also on the fact that when communism fell, then the people tried to change it to socialism. And then if your parents were going through divorce, you got written off. You were written, man or female, doesn't matter. So essentially, there were several teachers who would come up to me and he says, or she says, she's like, I'm not going to prepare you for college because you're not going to get there anyway. Because your parents just, you don't have the structure to be successful. And I said, screw you. I'm going to study myself. So when I was applying for medical school, when I was very young, there were 1,500 students applying and they were taking 30 of us. I was 16, right? So in some ways, you kind of beat these biases, like probably by getting thicker skin. And moving forward, there was multiple things. They were like, you will never speak for a language. Well, sorry, I speak for now, right? But their biases were, again, you get stronger and bigger and better. And in Slovakia, you can be on the unit. You cannot be in mountain rescue because you're female. Not because you're female, but because there is a law. And the law says you cannot lift heavier than 30 kilos. Right? So, and that's the law, protecting a woman. So you can be defied, and so you really can't do much. Even though I come from a long line of firefighters, my father, my grandpa, my aunt, every one of my family is firefighter. So I have been surrounded with this rescue mentality all the time. So when I got into the mountain rescue unit, I was honored. My father was like, oh my God, no way, you are in a mountain rescue unit. This is so cool. So he goes everywhere. He goes hunting. My daughter is a mountain rescue. He would be probably shocked to hear that I'm on the United States level. But it is really interesting because then you grow courage. You grow thicker skin. You go into the field with a man and female. And you are strong. We are strong. We show up and we have balls. We sometimes have, like our sheriff always tells me, you have more balls than some of you guys in your unit. But thanks. So yeah, I think the biases is that essentially don't think that the women or men who are next to you don't have the courage to be there, or they're not smart, or they're not strong enough to be there just because they're small, or they're a different color, or they come from a different country. They have the balls to be there if they are there. So that was my biases.
I guess for myself and biases, I grew up as a tomboy, where most of my friends were guys who was running around climbing trees, and so I had to learn for treating other women to not tear other women down the way that my guy friends would, because that's the group of friends that I grew up with. And so I'd say kind of as a teenager, I learned that even though I always have dirt under my nails, that if someone else has a French manicure, that doesn't change anything about them, except that they know that white nail polish covers the dirt that won't come out. So, we learned that. So that's something that I always have to check on myself when we have new people coming to the team, because I was raised as being a woman and a black woman, that my father told me that his grandfather had told him that you're going to have to work twice as hard to be on even footing, and you are expected to do that to better this family. And so my father told me, doubly so as a woman, you will work twice as hard because you will better this family. And so you kind of have that mantle on your shoulders, which has helped me to be a better person, I think. And I'm really grateful for that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that everyone else has to or should have that mantle on their shoulders. So when other women come to join the team, I have to make sure to not judge them as oh, well, you look like your hands are soft because of your day job. I don't know if you're going to represent well. I don't know if I want you. That's something that I am careful to make sure to not have permeate my thought process, because everyone has their own story in life, and it is human nature to create biases in general, right? It's part of what helps us to think quickly, is to be able to have images that represent certain things, and it allows for good basic reasoning skills where you can look at something and you can judge a situation and say, okay, I have a reasonable assumption that this is what this looks like, and that's a good thing. So having biases can be very good, but just remembering kind of where they came from and to reevaluate them on a regular basis is something that I've been learning and changing just over time, and I expect another 10, 20 years I'll have learned a lot more. So I guess that's my experience with them.
Those biases are, since we all have, it's important that we take time to learn from those and not allow them to affect our day-to-day life. And if they have affected our day-to-day life, we use that as a learning opportunity so that those negative impacts don't continue. Yes, question?
I just think about
especially, sorry, when you're talking about understanding how to divide over and stuff, and how even a smaller woman can do more maybe than a woman can. I'm thinking about a couple of years ago when I met a firefighter on one of his little fire departments. She's itty bitty and she's carrying all of this equipment. At the time I was like, how does she do that? I don't even think I could do that. And I'm just wondering, how can we take this a step further? How can we empower team members to understand the personal biases that are limiting themselves, and educate how they can condition themselves differently to do more than they think they can presently. And I think that even comes to whether it be a woman physically or someone who comes from minority who has always been told they can't do what they want to because whatever. And how do we organize our training to be, I guess, to target that, to empower our team members, and not only to address the biases that limit others, but how can we address our biases that are limiting ourselves?
I think the first part of that is to start the discussion, and that's what this is about. Because if you don't start the discussion, you don't know there's a problem. And if you don't take a critical look at yourself, your team, the culture of your team, it's hard to address something that no one recognizes to address. And then at that point, I think you have a very good point in that you have to look at the culture of your team. If you have a paramilitary style team like I do, how we address things is going to be very different than the cowboy team. So it has to fit with the culture of your team. So that's why I don't think one size pants will fit every team. But I think the MRA in this particular situation can provide resources, tools, and guidelines that maybe for a team that is a little bit more organic can identify with, and maybe a team that's more paramilitary can identify with, and then get the feedback on how that works. But I think that's important, is that you start the discussion, identify the problems, and then provide these resources and be dynamic in assessing them. Most of us have bylaws and SOPs that have not been changed in 20, 30, 40 years. That's the first part. Go back to your teams and address those written documents you haven't looked at in 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I do agree with that too. If there is a woman who is trying to be like everyone on the team, there can be deeper issues rather than just like, trying to prove herself to the rest of the team. I can carry as much as you can. But I said it yesterday too. I said, I belong where I can be me. I fit in where I have to be like you. Right? So if I don't get to be who I am in the unit where I am, then, I'm just trying to always prove and do something like the rest of the unit does. You have to cultivate a culture of safety, right? And so the safety then creates essentially like I'm losing the English word now, confidence, right? And so the confidence is that I can show up who I am today. I am tired today. I can't speak English before 8 and after 5. Right? I have safety words. I have safety words with some of the members on my team. If I start talking about sushi, you better take me out because I'm going home. If I say broken arrow, you better stand next to me. I do have certain stuff, but the culture of safety.
I also think that it's strongly a conversation of equity versus equality. So we go to pack weight, right? The equal solution is that we all carry the same size pack. Well, if I'm 125 pounds and he's 225 pounds, should we both be carrying 50 pounds in our backpack? I will do it. I will hike my ass uphill with that 50-pound backpack because that's the culture that I'm in, and that is what earns me the place of respect and belonging. But to caveat that conversation, that's not equitable. So to think about pack weight as a proportion of body weight and have that be the baseline standard. I'm not saying it is a blanket option or solution, but it is a nice way to have a more equitable foundation, and then people can choose if it fits for them to carry more. Maybe they're training more and they're more capable of carrying pack weight regardless of their size at that point in time. But I think that would be a good foundation to go to.
Maybe even educating or training the women, understanding how you can develop some more physical capacity that they don't have to.
So I tell you
who are at least 6 feet tall. And just like, I feel that it's something that, I'm not one of the short women in the team or short people in the team, but it makes it harder for us. So just one more thing to think of, maybe some of our kits can be more designed in terms of multiple small things inside that you can put in your backpack. I have no idea, maybe your litter frame can be designed in ways that would be more easily adjustable. I have no idea, I don't have solutions, but I know that it's something that's always been difficult.
But as a national organization, MRA can go to gear manufacturers and say, hey, our members are saying we need equipment and gear designed for women.
And I think to get at your question of like, how can we help each other overcome the biases we have for ourselves and things that we don't think is possible, I want to acknowledge Cassie and the Women in Rescue page. I think just seeing that it is possible. And so if you are someone, you know, if you are the only one on your team or you are someone that's doing something that no other women are, like, I know I'm wildly uncomfortable in kind of being more public about that or putting myself out there and showing that, but I think that is powerful to other women. When they see that, they know, oh, that is possible. When I see someone that's my height that is illiterate in it, oh, their feet can reach the wall. You know, like, there are ways to work around that. So, you know, we, I think, can support each other in, you know, even if it's just a text thread with the women on your team or whatever, of just like, hey, on this search segment today, like, I felt so good, I was so much faster than everybody on my team, like, whatever it is, just those humble brags and being able to say, like, I'm in this space and I feel comfortable in it and you can be there too, is really powerful and something that we can all do to support one another as women.
So to the very specific practical aspect of strength training, or training in general, to being able to keep up, I found maybe a year ago, and I really wish I'd known about it sooner, there's a book called Roar that I believe she's like an exercise physiologist, had put together a bunch of studies on women, because when you study sports training and exercise, a lot of the time the studies will exclude women because there's extra processes going on that make it really hard to filter it out of the data, right? And so you want to have good, clean data when you're doing a study. So there aren't as many studies done on women, and so kind of her premise in that book is that women are not small men and that we can train differently. So kind of looking into like women-specific training and like figuring out which things work for you on like which days, you can actually train yourself better, and it can help for getting your own physical fitness for stamina or strength or endurance. There's different ways to train for that, and it's not very visible, but if you can find it, it can be amazing, and it can help to feel like you're good enough if you figure out how to tailor things to you specifically. So I know that's been really helpful for me. So I just wanted to mention that in case anyone hadn't seen that. It's an awesome resource. There's that, and then I think the Uphill Athlete has some videos and podcasts on training specifically, which has helped a lot. Myself, I carry heavy. It's been kind of my identity with the team of maybe I don't know how to do that thing, maybe I'm terrified of heights, but you give me anything and I will get it up the hill. So that's me specifically, but I'm not one of the fastest people on the team, and so that's something that I've been kind of working on being able to get to with those resources myself.
I definitely want to make sure we took a moment to highlight what Women in Rescue is working on. So you might give us a case.
Can you answer a third question?
Yes.
The third question. Oh. Can I say one thing about gear? It's not just individual gear that needs to be addressed. It's also litters. It's also rescue gear that needs to be addressed. There might be ways to manufacture litters that are more universal for different body styles and heights. Those things need to be addressed too.
In terms of the patient, or in terms of
In terms of usability,
Carry
most
it up.
most litters are set up for a 6-foot man to carry or utilize. They are not addressing a 5'4" woman to use, and our center of gravity is different.
You mean to do anything with the wheel? We have like a fat bike wheel you can put on the bottom. It makes it really nice for 2 people.
people, and they have adjustable handles, so it kind of makes it so the 6'6" guy on the team can be on one end, and you can adjust it down for the next person, so you're not doing this game of, yeah, half of us can play on the litter, and the other half of us are miserable the whole time, because it's, you know, a bigger argument.
Those things are happening. I mean, we have a litter with a bicycle wheel and brakes and everything, and the handles too. But if you look at the width of those handles, they're out to here. That's kind of uncomfortable if you have short arms. You know, maybe the adjustability needs to be at 2 different points so they can attach here and then break in more. That kind of stuff needs to be looked at for manufacturers too, not just your backpack, not just your harness.
It took a long time to actually find a backcountry ski boots. I mean, how many of us are backcountry skiers? Like, it took me probably a decade to find a shoe which actually finally fit me. I think it's getting into the mountain rescue gear as well. I mean, the litters, the bikes, putting it on your backpacks. I mean, even like just yesterday when we were looking at rescue gear, right? Seattle Mountain Rescue did a great job in reorganizing our rigging kits with a smaller, nicer, they fit in most of our packs. We even made our own little packs. One of our guys made custom little packs, so it's nice and fits in every single little 30-liter backpack. So that is really helpful. But oh my goodness, some of the ropes, right? You really need a bigger bag. But it would be nice to include women if they are making rescue gear to ask their questions.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
I did have a question, but I'll turn it into a statement because of time. So a lot of my awareness of my own bias and unconscious bias came from my employer. I'm blessed to work for a company that has put a lot of time and energy into training leaders into understanding not only what their biases are, but also how to be an ally for inclusion and to help others, and then even help me understand my privilege and the opportunities I have to be in conversations with people that look like me, sound like me, when they're making statements, when no one different is around, to recognize that I've got a chance to fix that. And in that moment, to be there and say, you know, that's not okay, and here's why. And because I do believe our diversity makes us stronger and better. And I encourage MRA to recognize that not everybody works for companies that provide that type of training and understanding. And you've got a lot of allies out there, and you've got a lot of people that don't even know that they can be an ally or how to do it. So I'd encourage the affinity group or whatever, or the group that you're putting together, to also help people that look like me understand how we can help and how we can be a part of this and make this better. Because we need everybody here in this room. Our differences make us stronger.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. We were talking yesterday about like this. We didn't want to have this panel saying, pointing fingers at the guys saying, you are doing this wrong. We don't want them to walk on eggshells around us because we are also humans. We also have our biases. We also have our own issues. So thank you for bringing it up. But for sure, just this is not a blaming session. Not supposed to be, not pointing fingers in any shape or form.
We tried to pick topics that could be universal to anyone, male or female.
And I guess a quick closing remark. Myself and a teammate of mine have founded a community organization called Women in Rescue. And this came from the fact that in our organization, when the two of us joined the team 8 years ago, we didn't have a single female on the board of the directors or a single female in technical leadership. And when I decided to go for my first technician, I remember her making the statement to me of, I didn't even realize that I was allowed to do that. And that stemmed a huge conversation for us about representation and how important it is to be able to have representation in this space that show not just other women what we're capable of, but to show our entire community of the skill sets that women are able to bring, and to start highlighting some of the conversations around the barriers of even just entry into this field, not just the barriers that we see through growth in this field. And so if you do have social media, we're on both Facebook and Instagram for Women in Rescue. We're about to launch a website, and we're moving towards doing some collaborative blogs with women in this industry to highlight some of their experiences, both the positives, the negatives, and to try and provide some resources for organizations in terms of what is something like an affinity group. What is the research saying about affinity groups and how are they supported? Provide resources about intersectionality, because diversity and inclusion is an incredibly complicated conversation. And I know that we've also been talking to members of the MRA and with the DEI committee, and one of the asks that we had coming into this weekend is, when we've been faced with challenges, people ask us, where's the data? And we don't have the data currently, and so coming out very soon, Women in Rescue has done a survey that the MRA's DEI committee is supporting and sending out for us to start collecting some demographic data, so we can look at things like retention of different demographics within the MRA, so we can start addressing the conversation of maybe we do have 50% women who apply, 40% women who are accepted, and 10% of women who are in leadership roles. And that allows us to pinpoint the conversation of where those barriers and hurdles are, and how can we start focusing on those within organizations to overcome them. So if you do see that email come out, please push it out to your team to help support us in this effort of gathering data, and hopefully it's something that we can continue to work in collaboration with the MRA to have some long-term collections and observations of what our community composition is.
I just want to thank the panel for allowing us to be open and honest and vulnerable and really, share this information with us all. I think it's valuable, and lots of insights that we can take back to our teams, and really have more conversations surrounding this. And I just want to thank you all for coming to our panel. Thank you.
If I can make one more plug, normally, no, I haven't turned this side. My avalanche faces. But so if you want to make, I think, real change in the MRA, and hopefully to your teams, I encourage you to join the MRA Diversity and Inclusion Committee. It's where we are trying to find ideas. What are we going to do, and what's impactful? How can we make something more ergonomic, and then how can we get use the power of the MRA to encourage teams or vendors to make more ergonomic rescue gear. So if we need your help. We're doing as much as we can, but we can do more with your help. So please reach out to Cameron again, and we'll make some serious progress.
Thank you.
Thank you.